At 64 years old, Donna believed the abandoned quarry would be the place where her life finally disappeared. After 30 years of marriage, her husband kept the house, the money, and the version of the story that made him look reasonable. Donna got what nobody else wanted, a crumbling tool shed in a dead limestone quarry, handed to her like a final insult. To everyone else, it was useless land. A graveyard of stone, rust, and weeds. And for one terrible night, Donna believed they were right. Because when you've spent decades being useful to other people, and then they discard you, it's easy to confuse abandonment with worthlessness. But the quarry was hiding something. Beneath the grey walls and broken rock, water was still moving. Beauty was still buried there, waiting for the right hands to uncover it. And Donna, aching, broke, unwanted, and far more dangerous than anyone realized, was about to discover the same thing about herself. She thought this place would be where she came to die. Instead, it became the place where she finally met herself. And when the world returned months later expecting to find a broken woman fading quietly into stone, they found something else entirely, a sanctuary carved from ruin. A life rebuilt without permission, and a woman so transformed that everyone who once underestimated her was forced to look again. Donna had given Thomas 30 years. Not the glamorous kind of years people post about or praise in speeches, but the real ones, the years made of bills, routines, meals, repairs, compromises. And the quiet labor that makes a life look effortless from the outside. She had taken the small house he bought and turned it into a home. She stretched budgets, chose paint colors, repaired curtains, planted flowers, hosted holidays, and made every room feel warm enough that guests always thought comfort happened naturally. It didn't. It happened because Donna made it happen. And when Thomas decided he wanted someone younger, someone shinier, someone who did not remind him of time passing, he treated all of that labor as if it had never counted. The house stayed his. The savings stayed his. The life she had maintained was suddenly reframed as something he had provided, not something they had built together. Donna was left with almost nothing, except the quarry. He gave it to her like a joke no one bothered to hide. An abandoned limestone pit with a collapsing tool shed at the far end. Land no one wanted. Land no one valued. The kind of place a man hands over when he wants to believe he is still being fair while making sure the better future belongs to him. That was the cruelty of it. Thomas did not just leave Donna. He assigned her a value. And in his mind, that value matched the quarry exactly, used up, inconvenient, and not worth much to anyone anymore. Donna pulled into the quarry just before dusk, killed the engine, and sat in the silence like she had driven into the end of her own life. The place looked less like property and more like aftermath. Grey limestone walls rose around her in broken tiers, scarred from decades of blasting and neglect. Rusted machinery sat half-swallowed by weeds. The floor was uneven, strewn with rock, puddles, and brittle grass. At the far end stood the structure Thomas had so casually handed her, the tool shed that was now, apparently, her future. Up close, it was worse. The wood had gone grey with age. The roof sagged. One window was cracked. The door hung crooked on rusted hinges. Inside, the air smelled of mildew, old oil, and mouse droppings. There were broken tools in one corner, paint cans fused shut in another, and a stained mattress that looked like it had been dying longer than her marriage had been. Donna stood in the doorway with her 2 suitcases at her feet and felt something inside her collapse. She was 64. Her hands ached from arthritis. Her knees protested stairs, let alone quarry ground. She had no real savings, no children willing to take her side, no job history anyone would value, and no idea how to survive alone in a place that looked abandoned by even the birds. That night, curled on the filthy mattress with her coat pulled tight around her, Donna cried until she was empty. And somewhere between the cold and the dark, she thought the words she could not stop thinking, "This is where I die." Donna woke stiff, cold, and furious at her own body. Every joint protested when she sat up. Her back felt splintered. Her hands were swollen from the damp, and for a moment she stayed still on the stained mattress, listening to the silence outside and wondering if despair could become permanent. But the light creeping through the cracked window was different from the darkness she had fallen asleep in, and when she finally stepped outside, the quarry looked changed. Not softer. Just clearer. Morning sun slid over the limestone walls and revealed colors she had missed the day before: pale cream, warm gray, streaks of rust, even soft pink trapped inside the stone. The quarry floor still looked rough and abandoned, but now she could see shape, contour, texture. It was not pretty in any conventional way, yet it was not dead either. Then she heard it. Water. At first just a faint trickling sound, almost hidden beneath the breeze. Donna followed it to the far wall where sunlight struck damp rock. From a narrow crack in the limestone, clear water spilled in a thin steady stream, tracing a shining path down the stone before collecting in a shallow pool below. She stood there for a long time, one hand pressed against the cool wall. A spring. In a place everyone had dismissed as worthless, water had been moving all along. That did not make her hopeful exactly. Hope was still too far away. But it did something else. It interrupted her certainty. If life could still be hidden inside a dead quarry, then maybe this place was not only what it looked like. Maybe neither was she. After finding the spring, Donna stopped sitting still. Not because she suddenly felt hopeful, but because movement was the only thing standing between her and collapse. She dragged the worst of the junk out of the shed, one aching armload at a time. She swept years of filth into piles, wiped mildew from the walls, patched the worst roof leaks with old tarp and scrap metal, and forced the place into the bare minimum of livable. Every task hurt. Her hands cramped. Her knees burned. Her back felt like something held together by spite. But by the end of each day, the shed was a little less hostile. And that mattered. For 2 weeks, Donna survived like that, waking at dawn, washing in spring water, eating whatever cheap food she had left, and working until her body nearly quit. She spoke to no one. No one called. Silence became its own weather. Then the real storm came. It rolled in hard and grey, with wind strong enough to shake the shed and rain that seemed determined to find every weakness at once. Water poured through the patched roof, spread across the floor, soaked the mattress, and turned the shed into a cold, shallow basin. Donna spent hours trying to keep things dry, but by the second night she was shivering uncontrollably, exhausted, and starting to think the storm might finish what the divorce had started. That was when something inside her finally snapped, not in surrender, but in rage. Standing in the dark, soaked to the bone, Donna shouted into the storm with a voice she barely recognized. "I am not dying here for a man who decided I was nothing." Fueled by anger and half delirious from cold, Donna stormed out into the rain with a bucket in her hand and no real plan except refusal. The shed was flooding faster than she could manage, and the whole effort was absurd. She knew that. Still, she bailed water from the floor and threw it into the quarry like she was fighting the sky itself. Trip after trip, soaked through, slipping in mud, back screaming, lungs burning, she kept going because rage was warmer than fear and more useful than despair. On one of those trips, she fell. Her boot slid on slick stone, and she slammed hard into the quarry wall. Instinctively, she threw out her hand to catch herself, and felt something shift beneath her palm. A section of limestone near shoulder height moved slightly, as if it had already been loosening for years and had just been waiting for one hard impact. Donna pushed. The stone gave way and tumbled into the mud. Behind it was a narrow hollow in the rock, and from that opening, water poured in a stronger stream than the spring she had found before. It ran clear and cold, as if the quarry had been keeping part of itself hidden. At her feet lay the fallen stone. On its broken face, exposed by the impact, was a thin glittering seam of crystal. Not treasure. Not salvation. Just a small vein of beauty buried inside something everyone would have called worthless. Donna stood in the storm holding that broken rock, water rushing beside her, and understood something with sudden, painful clarity. Maybe worth had never depended on being chosen. Maybe it had only depended on being seen closely enough. When the storm finally passed, Donna stopped thinking like someone waiting to be rescued. She started thinking like someone who lived there. The change was subtle but absolute. She no longer looked at the quarry as punishment. She looked at it as material. The hidden water source became the first thing she tackled. Using rusted pipe sections scavenged from the abandoned machinery, she spent days experimenting with angles, joints, and supports until she managed to redirect the spring flow closer to the shed. It was crude and ugly and leaked in 3 places, but it worked. For the first time, water came to her instead of the other way around. That small victory changed everything. Next came warmth. Donna built a makeshift stove from an old metal drum and scraps of vent pipe, coughing through several smoky failures before she got the draft right. Once she did, the shed became survivable in a way it never had been before. Not comfortable. Not safe. But hers. Then she turned to order. She cleared the ground around the entrance, hauled flat stones from across the quarry, and laid them one by one into a rough patio so she would no longer step into mud every morning. The work was agonizing on her body. Her hand swelled. Her shoulders burned. Some nights she could barely lift a pot. But each task created something visible, and visible progress did something despair never could. It gave structure to her days. And in that structure, Donna began to feel a different kind of strength, not the strength of anger, but the strength of capability. Winter settled over the quarry with a kind of cruelty that made everything harder. The cold did not just live in the air. It got into the stone, the water, Donna's hands, her knees, her spine. Every morning she woke stiff and hurting, and every task took twice the effort it had a month earlier. Food was becoming a problem too. Her money was nearly gone. She rationed rice, canned vegetables, and whatever wild greens she could identify, but hunger became a steady background ache. Then came the injury. One bitter December afternoon, while hauling stone near the edge of the pond, Donna lost her grip on a heavy slab and dropped it hard onto her foot. The pain was instant and blinding. She made it back to the shed by sheer stubbornness, pulled off her shoe, and watched the swelling rise. Maybe it was badly bruised. Maybe fractured. It did not matter. She had no money for a doctor, no one to call, and nowhere else to go. That night, the despair came back strong enough to choke her. She looked at an old photo of herself and Thomas from the previous Christmas, 2 smiling people standing in front of a tree, pretending a life was still intact. Then she looked at her reflection in the dark phone screen, gaunt, exhausted, grey-haired, alone in a freezing shed with an injured foot and no witness to any of it. For the first time in months, she thought seriously about stopping. Then her eyes landed on the crystal-veined stone sitting on the workbench. And she remembered, worth does not disappear just because nobody is looking. By late February, the quarry no longer looked abandoned. It looked awakened. The change had not happened all at once. It came through hundreds of small decisions, each one made by Donna's aching hands, each one refusing the lie that broken places had to stay broken. The hidden spring now fed a proper pond, its edges lined with flat stone she had hauled and fitted one piece at a time. The rough pipe system had grown into a chain of small water channels and spills, turning the quarry's old silence into something softer, the sound of moving water echoing against limestone. Birds began to come. First a few sparrows, then chickadees, cardinals, and whatever else found the water and stayed. Donna watched them from her small stone bench in the afternoons and felt the quarry answering her work with life. The shed changed too. Inside, she had built shelves, a real bed frame, a narrow table, and storage from scrap wood and salvaged metal. She painted the walls with old leftover paint she found in sealed cans, giving the room light where there had only been mildew and defeat. On the floor, she set small stones into the concrete in a rough mosaic border that made the space feel less like a storage room and more like a home. Outside, paths appeared. Stone-lined walkways curved through the quarry floor. Small cave pockets in the limestone became tiny shrines for beautiful things she found, crystal-veined stones, weathered metal, seed jars, bird feathers. What had once been a dead hole in the ground was becoming something sacred. And Donna, without ever saying it aloud, was becoming the kind of woman who could make holy places out of ruin. Thomas came back in April. Donna heard the car before she saw it, an engine sound so unfamiliar after months of quarry silence that it made her body tense automatically. When the silver Mercedes rolled down the rough entrance road and stopped beside the pond, she straightened slowly from the garden bed where she had been working and wiped the dirt from her hands. He stepped out looking polished, older, and deeply out of place. At first, he said nothing. He just stared. At the pond. The stone paths. The running water. The softened walls. The shed that no longer looked abandoned, but lived in. His face moved through confusion, shock, and something close to awe. "My God," he said quietly. "What have you done?" Donna stood very still. She had imagined this moment in bitter ways during the winter, imagined wanting revenge, or vindication, or at least the satisfaction of watching him squirm. But standing there now, she felt almost nothing except distance. "I live here," she said. Thomas walked slowly through the quarry, as if trying to understand how the place he had dismissed as useless had become beautiful without his permission. Then he turned back to her and said the thing that explained their whole marriage in one sentence. "I had no idea you could do something like this." Donna almost smiled. Neither had she. Then came the apology, awkward and self-serving beneath its regret. He said he had made a mistake. Said maybe they could fix things. Start again. Donna looked around at the life she had made from what he threw away. "No," she said calmly. "You gave me this place because you thought it was worthless. You were wrong about the quarry. And you were wrong about me." The first woman came in June. Her name was Patricia, and she stood at the edge of the quarry like someone approaching a rumor she did not fully believe. She had heard, through the kind of small-town whisper network that carries both cruelty and miracles, that a woman in her 60s was living alone in the abandoned quarry and had somehow turned it into something beautiful. Patricia had recently been left by her husband too. Her children were already using words like practical and facility. She looked at Donna with the hungry, frightened expression of someone trying to decide whether hope was still a responsible emotion. Donna did not give speeches. She showed her the paths. The pond. The spring. The shed that had once been a place to die and was now a place to live. Patricia came back the next week. Then she brought another woman. Then another. A pattern formed. Older women arrived carrying the same wound in different clothing: divorce, widowhood, abandonment, children who had grown cold, a world that seemed to think their useful years were over. Donna never called herself a teacher, but that was what she became. She taught them how to see materials differently, how to use old stone and rusted scrap and dead-looking ground as starting points instead of proof of failure. More importantly, she taught them to look at themselves the same way. The quarry changed again. It became not just Donna's sanctuary, but a gathering place for women relearning their own value, women who had been told they were too old, too broken, too unnecessary, and were now finding out none of that was true. By the time autumn returned, Donna had been living in the quarry for nearly a year. She was 65 now, and nothing about her life looked respectable by the standards that once ruled her. She did not have a husband, a neat suburban house, or a role anyone could point to and approve of. What she had instead was harder earned and far more real, a life she had built with her own hands, a sanctuary that fed her spirit. And a circle of women who kept returning because something in this place reminded them they were not finished. Patricia arrived one afternoon with her daughter, Jessica, who was 42 and newly divorcing. Jessica looked around the quarry with the hollow, stunned expression Donna recognized immediately. It was the face of a woman whose life had been rearranged without her consent, who no longer knew what parts of herself were still standing. Donna did not overwhelm her with comfort. She told her the truth. Starting over is hard. It is lonely. It is humiliating. And it is also possible. She showed Jessica the pond, the water channels, the gardens growing out of stone, and the little shed that had once felt like a sentence. She told her about the winter, the injury, the hunger, the night she nearly gave up. Then she told her the part that mattered most, that strength was not something she had possessed at the beginning. It was something she built. One day. One choice. One act of creation at a time. And standing there in the quarry, Donna understood that her story had become larger than survival. It had become permission. A year after arriving at the quarry, convinced it would be the place where her life ended, Donna stood in the center of it and understood the truth at last. Nothing had ended. It had only been stripped down far enough for something real to begin. The woman who first stepped out of that car had believed her worth depended on being chosen, needed, and kept. She thought being discarded meant becoming nothing. But the quarry taught her otherwise. Water had been flowing beneath that stone long before anyone noticed it. Beauty had been hidden there whether the world valued it or not. So had hers. Donna did not become powerful because Thomas came back sorry. She did not become valuable because other women finally saw her. She became whole the moment she understood that her worth had never depended on anyone else's recognition. That is what this story proves. Age does not erase value. Being alone is not the same as being nothing. And the places people call ruined often hold the deepest reservoirs of life. Donna built a sanctuary from stone, water, and what the world threw away. But the most important thing she built was inside herself, a life no one could take, a peace no one had the power to grant or remove, and a truth strong enough to outlast abandonment. She always mattered.